Greetings, traveler. I'm glad to see you in my tavern. Here you may rest after a hard road, drink a mug of good ale, and listen to an old, honest witcher's tale, one that smells of smoke, winding roads, and silver coins. The wind carried a scent of rain as Geralt of Rivia rode along the half-forgotten trail that wound through the borderlands of Temeria and Lyria. The path was little more than a ribbon of mud and roots, flanked by black alders and willows whose branches reached out like long, dripping fingers. His horse Roach snorted softly, ears twitching at every distant cry of a night bird. The air was heavy with mist, the kind that dulled every sound and made the world feel as though it were holding its breath. Geralt tugged the reins, slowing his pace as the dim outline of a village emerged from the fog, a cluster of low, thatched roofs, smoke rising weakly from a few crooked chimneys. The wooden sign at the entrance read Dunmare, though the paint was so faded that the letters seemed to bleed into the grain. He had not planned to stop here, but a witcher seldom ignored whispers of monsters, and the tavern in the last town had been full of them. Travelers gone missing, voices in the fog, eyes in the dark that glowed like lanterns. He needed coin and distraction. Both were always in short supply. As he passed through the narrow lanes, villagers watched him from behind shuttered windows. A witcher was a rare sight in these parts, too costly for small folk, unless fear outweighed poverty. Geralt dismounted before the inn, a squat timber house with a sagging roof and a lantern that flickered in the wind. He led Roach to the stable, gave her an affectionate pat, and stepped inside. The warmth of the fire was a welcome change. The smell of stewed cabbage and damp wool hung in the air. A few men sat at a corner table, their faces pale in the lamplight. Their talk died the moment Geralt entered. The innkeeper, a round man with a face like a boiled turnip, gave a wary nod. "Evenin', stranger," he said, polishing a cup that didn't need polishing. "We don't get your kind often." "Then you'll know I don't drink for free," Geralt replied, laying a few coins on the counter. "Heard talk of a wraith in these parts. Thought I might take a look." The innkeeper's eyes darted toward the others. "Aye," he muttered, lowering his voice. "Mist wraith, they call it. Comes with the fog. You'll hear someone you know calling your name, and if you answer—" He stopped, throat working. "You don't come back. Not a soul's been found. Only things left are wet footprints that vanish into nothing." Geralt nodded. It sounded like superstition, but superstition often hid truth. "Who posted the notice?" The man hesitated. "No notice. We haven't dared. Word is, if you speak of it too much, the fog finds you quicker." Geralt allowed himself a thin smile. "I'll take my chances." He spent the night in the common room sharpening his blades by the firelight. The silver sword gleamed, catching the dancing flames as if eager for work. Outside, the mist pressed against the window panes, thick and silent. A dog howled somewhere far off, then stopped as if choked mid-breath. At dawn, the fog still lay heavy over Dunmare. Geralt walked the outskirts, his medallion trembling faintly against his chest. A sure sign of magic. He knelt near the lake where the ground turned to sucking mud. The surface was still, too still, reflecting only the gray sky above. A small wooden pier jutted out, half-rotten, its posts swallowed by the mist. He saw footprints there, light, bare, as though left by a child. They ended abruptly at the edge of the water. No signs of struggle, no blood. Geralt crouched, fingertips brushing the mud. A faint hum rose in the air, the lingering trace of a spell. Illusion magic, perhaps, or necromancy gone astray. He straightened, scanning the mist, and for a moment thought he saw a figure standing on the lake, a pale outline, hair floating like a halo of smoke. But when he blinked, it was gone. That evening he returned to the inn. The villagers had gathered again, voices hushed, faces drawn. An old woman was weeping softly, clutching a child's wooden toy in her hands. "Another gone?" Geralt asked. "Aye," the innkeeper whispered. "Little Bram, the miller's boy, ran out this morning saying he heard his mother calling him from the shore. But his mother's been dead 2 years." Geralt's eyes darkened. "Show me where." They led him to the lake's edge under the shroud of night. The mist swirled thicker now, alive with whispers. Geralt drew a sign in the air. Yrden, the glowing rune forming a circle of violet light around him. The whispers faltered, then changed, turned into laughter, soft and hollow. A shape emerged from the fog, a small silhouette, barefoot, dripping. The child's voice echoed faintly. "Mr. Witcher, can you help me? I can't find my home." Geralt's hand tightened on his sword hilt, though he did not draw it. The medallion vibrated so violently it was almost painful. The figure stepped closer, and the mist peeled back just enough to show a face, not human, eyes like pools of milk, skin as translucent as water. The child smiled, a broken thing, and whispered, "Mama said you'd come." Then the fog surged, swallowing the world in gray. Geralt leapt back, blade flashing, and the world went cold as frost. Something brushed past him, cold fingers grazing his arm, and for a heartbeat he saw visions in the mist, faces of the dead, places long gone, voices he knew and wished to forget. Ciri's laughter, Yen's voice calling his name, Kaer Morhen's gates covered in snow, and then it was gone. The Witcher stood alone on the shore, the fog receding as if satisfied. The villagers stared from a distance, afraid to speak. He sheathed his sword slowly. "This isn't a wraith," he murmured. "It's something else." The night air was still, but he felt the weight of eyes upon him. Something watching from within the mist. Something that knew his name. He turned back toward the village, already knowing this was no ordinary contract. This fog had a purpose, and it was waiting for him. Morning came with neither warmth nor color. The sun rose unseen, a pale disk behind the fog, giving no comfort to Dunmare. Smoke from the chimneys clung low to the roofs, merging with the mist that rolled in from the lake. Geralt stood by the inn's doorway, fastening the buckles of his armor while the village stirred in uneasy silence. The encounter from the night before had left his senses sharpened, his instincts restless. What he had seen, or thought he had seen, did not belong to any wraith he knew. It had neither the malice of a noon wraith nor the hunger of a night wraith. It was quieter, sadder, and far more deliberate. Something bound, not feral, something waiting. He stepped into the muddy street. The air stank faintly of rotting reeds and stagnant water. 2 men passed him carrying nets, their eyes hollow as though drained of sleep. When they saw him, they made the sign of the eternal fire and crossed to the other side. Geralt ignored them. Superstition was as thick here as the mist. At the edge of the lake he found a trail, a faint line of prints leading away from the shore toward the marshes to the north. He crouched and touched the ground. The mud shimmered faintly, disturbed by magic, the residue of a portal or a summoning, perhaps. Either way, someone or something had been using the fog as cover. Looking for ghosts, Witcher? The voice was soft but steady. Geralt turned. A woman stood among the reeds, her cloak damp, the hood shadowing her face. Her hair, silver blonde and tangled by the mist, caught what little light there was. She moved with the poise of someone accustomed to danger, her eyes sharp as a blade's edge. "Depends who's asking," Geralt said. The woman smiled faintly. "Name's Laurana. I heard there's a witcher in the village, hunting our so-called mist wraith. I thought we might compare notes." Geralt watched her for a moment before replying. "You're no villager." "No," she said. "I was once a mage of Ban Ard. Now I'm simply a traveler who's made too many mistakes." Her tone was even, but Geralt caught the tremor beneath it. He'd known that voice before, the voice of one who had meddled with power beyond her reach. "What do you know of the creature?" he asked. Laurana glanced toward the lake. "It isn't what they think. It's not a ghost or a curse. It's a creation. Mine, in a way." Geralt said nothing, waiting. The woman hesitated, then drew a trembling breath. "Years ago I lost someone here. A man. I tried to bring him back. I used forbidden methods, necromancy among them. But the ritual went wrong. Instead of him, something else took shape. Something born of my grief and his spirit. I bound it to the fog to contain it, but the spell weakened over time. Now it feeds on voices, memories, the warmth of the living." Geralt frowned. "You made a guardian." "I made a mistake," she whispered. The Witcher studied her face, searching for deceit. There was none, only guilt, deep, old, festering. "And now it's killing," he said flatly. "You should have destroyed it." "I tried," she answered, voice breaking, "but it's tied to me. Destroying it may destroy me as well. I came back to finish it or die trying, but the fog no longer obeys me." Geralt looked out over the lake again. The surface rippled without wind, as if stirred by something beneath. "It's hunting children now," he said. "You'll help me stop it, one way or another." Laurana met his gaze and nodded. "I will." They set out toward the marshes where the prince had vanished. The path twisted through reeds that whispered like voices. The ground squelched beneath their boots, sucking at every step. The air grew colder, heavier. The world seemed to fade, colors draining away until only gray remained. Geralt's medallion trembled again, stronger this time. He drew a sign in the air, Ard, and the mist shivered outward, parting in a circle. The light revealed remnants of ritual, blackened candles, fragments of bone, runes carved into the roots of a dead tree. Laurana inhaled sharply. "My work," she said, kneeling. "The binding circle, it's broken." Geralt examined the markings. Something tore through it from within. Before she could answer, the mist thickened again, swirling with unnatural speed. The sound of laughter, childlike, distant, echoed through the reeds. Geralt drew silver, stepping ahead of Laurana. "Stay behind me." The fog gathered into form. A small figure stood before them, barefoot, dripping water, head tilted as if curious. The child's eyes glowed faintly blue, the same hue as drowned men in the Yaruga. "Mother," the boy whispered. Laurana froze. "No. Oh gods, no." The child's gaze turned to her. His face was twisted, half shadow, half flesh, as though two worlds fought within him. "You left me," he said, his voice echoing like a ripple across water. "You left me in the dark." Laurana took a step forward, tears streaking her cheeks. "I tried to bring you back, Merrick. I tried." The boy screamed. The sound shattered the air. The fog erupted, slamming into them like a wave. Geralt staggered but held his ground, slicing through the mist with a swift arc of silver. The blade hissed as it cut something unseen, and the scream faltered. The fog recoiled. When it cleared, the boy was gone. Only ripples spread across the shallow water, fading slowly. Geralt lowered his sword, breathing hard. "That thing isn't your son anymore," he said quietly. Lorana knelt, trembling. "I know, but I have to end it." Geralt corrected. "You won't last alone?" She looked up at him, surprise flickering in her eyes. Witchers weren't known for mercy, yet this one spoke without judgment. She nodded once, resolute. "There's an old sanctuary beneath the marsh where I performed the ritual. The creature will return there to feed. That's where we ended." Geralt sheathed his blade. "Then we go at night." As they turned back toward the village, the mist followed like a living thing, coiling through the trees, whispering with every gust. Behind them, faint and sorrowful, came the child's voice again, soft as a lullaby. "Don't leave me, Mother. It's so cold here." Lorana stopped for a heartbeat, trembling, then forced herself to move on. Geralt said nothing. He knew too well the pain of ghosts that would not rest. By the time they reached the inn, darkness had fallen. The villagers had barred their doors, leaving the streets empty. Geralt sat by the fire, sharpening his blades once more, the rhythmic scrape of steel the only sound. Outside, the mist pressed against the windows, like breath. And somewhere beyond, in the heart of the marsh, a child's laughter drifted through the fog, thin, distant, and unbearably human. The moon rose over Dunmere that night, pale and thin as a blade. Its light cut through the fog in slivers, turning the world to shades of silver and gray. Geralt sat by the window of the inn, his eyes fixed on the distant shimmer of the lake. Every sound seemed amplified. The creak of wood, the hiss of the hearth, the faint hum of the medallion against his chest. Lorana sat across from him, her cloak drawn tight, the flickering firelight catching on the silver threads woven into the fabric. She'd been silent for hours, staring into the flames as if seeking forgiveness in their restless dance. When she finally spoke, her voice was hoarse. "There's a place under the marsh," she said quietly. "A forgotten shrine to Melitele, long before the eternal fire took root in these lands. I found it years ago when I came here to try what should never have been tried. The child, Marek, was buried nearby. His spirit lingered half here, half in the other place. That's where the fog began." Geralt nodded slightly. "Old shrines make strong anchors. Spirits cling to them easily. You used that to call him back." Lorana winced but did not deny it. "I was desperate. He drowned in the marsh while I was away. I thought if I could reach him before his essence faded, I could restore him. But the ritual demanded balance, life for life. I refused the price. The magic took what it could instead." "The fog," Geralt said, "and the thing inside it." She met his gaze. "You think me a monster. I think you played with something no one can control," he said simply. "But that's not new. Mages always believe they can rewrite the laws of nature. The world usually proves them wrong." She smiled faintly, bitterly. "And yet here I am, asking a witcher for help." "Better me than a priest," he replied. Outside, a gust of wind shook the shutters, scattering sparks from the hearth. The smell of damp wood filled the room. Geralt stood, tightening the straps of his gauntlets. "We move now, before dawn." They left the inn in silence, their steps muffled by the mist. The village slept uneasily behind them, hidden beneath the pale veil. Ahead, the marsh stretched wide and endless, a labyrinth of stagnant pools and twisted trees. The reeds rustled softly as if whispering secrets to the fog. Geralt moved first, every sense alert. His cat-like eyes pierced the gloom, his medallion humming faintly with each pulse of magic. Laurana followed close, clutching her staff, a faint blue glow forming at its tip. The deeper they went, the thicker the air became, heavy with moisture and decay. Frogs croaked unseen, and somewhere far off, a heron screamed, its cry muffled by the fog. Then came silence, a deep, unnatural silence that made the hairs on Geralt's neck rise. "Stay close," he said. They came upon the ruins of the shrine near the heart of the marsh, a circle of broken stones half buried in the mud, the remnants of old carvings still visible beneath moss. At the center stood a cracked statue of Melitele, the goddess's face eroded into featureless stone. The air shimmered faintly around it, alive with residual magic. "This is where it began," Laurana whispered. "This is where he died." Geralt circled the statue, scanning the ground, and where he returns. He knelt, drawing a circle in the mud with his sword point, then scattered powdered silver along the edge. "Yrden," he murmured, and the rune flared to life, its glow casting long shadows across the shrine. "When it comes, stay inside the circle, no matter what it shows you." Laurana nodded, though her hands trembled. Minutes passed. The fog stirred but did not move. Then faintly, from beyond the reeds, came a voice, soft and sweet. "Mother." Laurana's breath caught. "Marek." Geralt didn't move. The fog thickened, swirling like a living thing, coalescing into the shape of a child. The figure stepped forward, pale and dripping, eyes glowing with ghostly light. Its voice was both near and far, echoing inside their skulls. "Mother, it's so dark. I can't find my way." Laurana took a step forward. "Stay where you are," Geralt barked, but the plea in the child's tone was too much. She knelt at the edge of the circle, tears streaming down her face. "I'm here, my love," she whispered. "I'm here now." The child smiled, and for a heartbeat, Geralt saw something almost human in that face. But then the smile twisted. The fog around them thickened, seeping into the circle like tendrils. Geralt drew his silver sword, muttering another sign, Quen. A shield of golden light enveloped them as the first wave struck. The wraith's scream tore through the air, and the fog exploded outward. Figures appeared within it. Men, women, children, faces of those the mist had taken. Their mouths opened in silent cries as they swirled around the Witcher and the mage. Laurana raised her staff, releasing a burst of blue fire that cut through the phantoms. They dissolved like smoke, but more took their place. "It's feeding on me," she cried. "On my guilt." Geralt slashed through the air, his blade singing, each strike cutting through the fog's illusions. "Then stop feeling guilty," he snarled. "It's using it against you." She screamed as another vision appeared before her, her son as he once was, laughing, running through a meadow. She fell to her knees, weeping. "Please, Geralt, don't hurt him." "It's not him," Geralt said, stepping forward. The fog solidified again, and the child stood before him, eyes burning white. "You killed them," the wraith whispered, voice low and accusing. "You kill everything." Geralt froze for an instant. The faces in the mist shifted. Renfrey, Vesemir, countless others he'd failed. The fog knew his memories too. His heart hardened. "Aye," he said quietly, and I'll kill you too if I must." He lunged. The sword flashed silver, cutting through the apparition. The scream that followed shook the marsh to its roots. The fog reeled back, splitting open like a wound. Light burst from within, blinding and terrible. When the haze cleared, the child was gone. Only a pool of still water remained where he had stood. Lorana collapsed, trembling. "Is it over?" Geralt sheathed his sword slowly. "No, that was only part of it. The core still lingers. In the water, bound to this place. We'll have to break the tether at dawn." She nodded weakly. "Then I'll prepare the ritual. But..." She looked up at him, eyes hollow. "When it's done, I may not survive it." Geralt looked away. "Do it anyway." They made camp near the shrine, the fog holding its distance for the first time. The fire crackled weakly, and the marsh fell silent again. Geralt sat watch, eyes fixed on the lake's pale surface. In its reflection, he thought he saw a small figure standing upon the water, watching. And for the first time in a long while, the Witcher felt something like dread. The dawn crept slowly across the marsh, staining the mist in hues of gray and silver. No birds sang. The reeds stood still, as if carved from stone. Even the frogs had fallen silent, their voices smothered by the cold breath of morning. Geralt sat upon a fallen log near the old shrine, methodically polishing his blade. Each stroke of the whetstone whispered in the stillness like the ticking of a clock. Lorana knelt a few paces away, tracing sigils in the damp earth with trembling fingers. Her cloak was soaked through, and her hair hung limp with dew, yet she worked with feverish focus, murmuring incantations under her breath. Around her, faint blue light flickered, magic old as the stones themselves, bound to the earth and air. "The fog's quiet," Geralt said at last, eyes narrowing as he looked toward the lake. "Too quiet?" Lorana did not glance up. "It knows we're preparing. It's waiting for dusk. The veil between worlds is weakest then." "Convenient," he muttered. "Monsters always choose dusk or midnight, never noon." That drew the faintest hint of a smile from her. "Perhaps they appreciate a sense of drama." Geralt grunted. "Drama gets people killed." He rose, scanning the tree line. The fog hung motionless, but he could feel it, an oppressive weight pressing down on the world. It was not gone, merely watching. Every Witcher sense screamed of danger yet to come. By midday they had gathered what they needed. Lorana's plan was simple, if perilous. She would unbind the spirit by reversing the ritual that had created it, offering up the tethered energy of her own life to free the child's soul. Geralt would stand guard, keeping the entity at bay until the circle closed. It was the sort of magic that could not be halted once begun. "You could still walk away," Lorana said quietly, as she drew lines of salt and ash around the shrine. "When the ritual starts, you'll have no control over what comes. I can't protect you." Geralt gave a humorless smile. "You've seen what I am. I don't need protecting." The mage looked up, her eyes reflecting the pale light. "You say that as though it's a virtue." He said nothing. The silence between them grew heavy. When the sun dipped low and shadows stretched long across the marsh, they began. The first note of Lorana's incantation rose soft and low, carried on the damp air. The runes carved into the stones flared faintly, pulsing like heartbeats. The air thickened, humming with unseen power. Geralt drew his silver sword and took his place at the circle's edge. He had faced drowners, grave hags, and specters of every sort, but this felt different. This was not the malice of a creature born from hatred. It was sorrow given form, grief sharpened into claws. As Lorana's voice grew stronger, the fog began to stir. Wisps curled inward, twisting upon themselves until the air shimmered with cold. Geralt's medallion vibrated violently. "It's coming," he said. Lorana did not answer. She was deep in trance now, eyes rolled white, hands raised. Blue fire streamed from her palms into the earth, tracing the sigils she had drawn. The ground trembled. The statue of Malit lay cracked further, a low moan echoing through the marsh. Then the fog erupted. It poured from the lake like a flood, sweeping through the trees in a surge of pale light. Within it moved shapes, faces half-formed, hands reaching, mouths whispering. The child emerged from the mist, his figure flickering like candlelight. His eyes burned brighter than before, two spheres of silver fire. "Mother," he said, voice both tender and terrible, "you came back." Lorana faltered, tears streaming freely now. "Marek, forgive me." The child's head tilted. "You left me in the cold." The fog surged forward, slamming against the protective circle. Geralt thrust his sword into the air, shouting the sign of Yrden. The rune flared, violet arcs racing along the circle's edge. The wraith screamed, recoiling. Its voice carried through the fog like the sound of breaking glass. Geralt advanced, swinging his blade in a wide arc. The silver cut through the mist, scattering fragments of light. The ground shook beneath his boots, and whispers clawed at his mind. Voices from his past, from the path he'd walked too long. Butcher of Blaviken. Monster. Cursed thing. He gritted his teeth, pushing through. "I've heard worse." Lorana's chant faltered again, her strength fading. The blue flames around her flickered wildly. "Geralt!" she cried. "It's breaking the circle!" The Witcher spun, driving his sword deep into the heart of the fog. For an instant he felt something solid, the faint resistance of flesh or spirit. The wraith shrieked, the sound piercing his skull. The fog exploded outward, throwing him to the ground. When he rose, the child stood before Lorana, his form clearer than ever. His small hands reached out almost tenderly to touch her cheek. "Come with me, Mother. It's warm where I am." Lorana's tears glistened. "I can't. Not yet. You must go on." The child's face twisted in rage. The air grew colder still, frost creeping across the stones. Geralt stumbled forward shouting, but the fog struck first. Tendrils lashed at him, knocking the sword from his hand. The world blurred, vision narrowing to flashes of light and shadow. He saw Kaer Morhen, snow falling silent upon ancient walls. He saw Ciri's smile, wild and free, and then her eyes fading into the same pale light as the child's. He roared, driving the visions away. His hand found the hilt of the dagger at his belt, a blade coated with specter oil. With a swift motion, he hurled it through the air. The dagger struck the wraith's chest. The fog erupted in a scream so loud it shook the marsh. Lorana collapsed, her voice rising in one final incantation that drowned out everything else. The runes ignited in a ring of blue fire, rising like pillars around the shrine. The light consumed the child, and for a moment Geralt saw the faintest smile upon its face. Then the mist shattered. When the light faded, only silence remained. The fog was gone. The lake lay still and clear for the first time in years. Geralt staggered to his feet. Lorana lay motionless at the base of the statue, her body pale as the dawn, her lips curved faintly, peaceful at last. In her open hand glimmered a small amulet, shaped like a tear of glass. He knelt beside her, closing her fingers around it. "You freed him," he said quietly. "And yourself." The wind stirred through the reeds, gentle and clean. The Witcher rose, sheathing his sword. As he turned to leave, he glanced back once more. For a heartbeat, he thought he saw a boy standing by the water's edge, smiling softly before fading into the morning light. Geralt said nothing. He mounted Roach, and together they rode away from Dunmare, leaving behind only the whisper of reeds and the faint shimmer of mist dissolving into the sun. But as the wind shifted, a single voice, soft, almost imagined, drifted after him through the air. "Thank you, Witcher." He didn't look back. The road from Dunmare wound through the wet lowlands like a serpent of mud and mist. The morning after the fog had lifted, Geralt of Rivia rode in silence, his cloak heavy with dew, the ache of sleeplessness dragging behind his eyes. Roach's hooves squelched in the softened earth, each step sounding like a sigh. The world was washed clean but fragile, as if the lifting of the curse had stolen something vital from it. He did not look back toward the lake. Witchers were not made for lingering. They came, they cleansed, they moved on. Yet the image of Lyrana's still face lingered like smoke behind his eyes. The way her lips had shaped a final spell, the faint peace that had settled upon her when the fog had scattered. He told himself that what she had done was her choice, that she had met her end as many mages did, consumed by their own craft. Still, a weight pressed upon him. He could almost hear Vesemir's voice in his mind, steady and weary. "We're not here to judge, Geralt, only to keep the balance. Don't mistake pity for purpose." The Witcher urged Roach onward. By midday, the sun had broken through the last wisps of mist. The path climbed gradually, leading into the low hills, where the air smelled of pine and cold stone. A wooden milestone marked the boundary of Lyria's domain. Beyond lay roads, patrolled by soldiers of Queen Meve, though Geralt doubted any would bother a lone traveler who looked half monster himself. Near a stream crossing, he dismounted to water the mare. As he knelt by the bank, he caught sight of movement in the reflection, 2 riders approaching from the west. He rose slowly, hand drifting to the hilt of his steel sword. The men wore light mail, their tabards bearing the faded lion of Lyria. "Ho there," one called, raising a hand. His voice was cautious, not hostile. "You're the Witcher they spoke of in Dunmare?" Geralt gave a single nod. The younger soldier glanced uneasily toward the marshlands. "Folk say the mist is gone. You did that?" Geralt shrugged. "Mist's gone, yes. Nothing more to say." The older man dismounted, studying him with narrowed eyes. "We had patrols vanish near that lake. Good men. The Crown'll want word that the road's clear again." "It's clear," Geralt said, mounting once more. "But tell your queen to keep folk away from the shrine. Some places never heal." The soldiers exchanged uncertain looks. "Aye," the older one muttered. "So it always goes with magic." They let him pass, and soon their shapes dwindled behind him. By late afternoon, he reached the market hamlet of Darren's Ford. It was little more than a collection of timber houses clustered around a stone bridge. But after days in the wild, even that seemed welcome. He tethered Roach outside the tavern and stepped in. Warm air, heavy with the scent of ale and roasting meat, greeted him. Conversations faltered for an instant. Old instinct at the sight of cat eyes and twin swords, but resumed once the barkeep nodded him a wary welcome. Geralt took a seat near the hearth, ordering stew and bread. He ate in silence, listening to the room's murmur. The talk was of harvests, of rumors from the north, of Nilfgaardian raiders seen near the river. But one name caught his ear amid the chatter, spoken low, as though feared even in daylight. Said the mage rode this way, all in gray, eyes like storm glass. Said she was looking for the Witcher. Geralt's spoon paused halfway to his mouth. Mage? He said without looking up. The barkeep nodded slowly. Aye. Came through 2 days past. Didn't give her name, only asked if anyone had seen a man with white hair and 2 swords. Paid for information, but we didn't have any to give. Which way? South, toward the sodden road. Might be she's waiting at the crossroads. Geralt's jaw tightened. Yennefer, perhaps. Or Triss. But no, he doubted either would hunt him so openly. Too many eyes, too much risk. Whoever she was, she had reason to find him soon after the mists of Dunmare had cleared. That alone was cause enough for unease. He finished his meal, left coin on the table, and rose. As he turned to leave, a hand touched his arm. Witcher? Said a voice behind him. A man in a faded scholar's robe stared up, his eyes wide with curiosity. I couldn't help overhearing. You dealt with the fog near Dunmare, yes? Did you see what caused it? Geralt studied him. Why? The scholar's fingers twitched. Because I study manifestations of interplanar rifts. There have been others, small at first, then growing stronger, all accompanied by mists that whisper. If your case is the same. He trailed off, realizing the Witcher's expression had hardened. Mists don't whisper on their own, Geralt said. Something makes them. The scholar nodded eagerly. Exactly. Something or someone. There are reports that fragments of the conjunction are reawakening. Tears between worlds. If the boundary weakens again, spirits like your wraith may not stay bound to graves. Geralt frowned. Sounds like tavern talk. Perhaps, but if more of these fogs appear, you'll find work aplenty. I'm heading toward Vengerberg to deliver my findings. If you'd share what you learned. But the Witcher was already moving toward the door. He had no wish to discuss theories of worlds colliding. He'd seen enough evidence of that in his lifetime, and enough dead to prove the point. Outside, dusk had fallen. The air smelled of rain and horse sweat. He mounted Roach and turned south toward the crossroads, following the faint glimmer of lanterns along the road. The path narrowed through a stretch of forest where the trees leaned close, their branches heavy with moss. The moon rose behind shrouded clouds, and shadows deepened. Somewhere ahead, a horse whinnied softly. Geralt drew rein. A figure stood by the roadside, a woman wrapped in a gray cloak. Her hair was hidden beneath a hood, her posture calm and deliberate. When she lifted her head, the moonlight caught the glint of her eyes. You took your time, she said. Her voice was clear, precise, touched by a faint lilt that spoke of Aretusa. I expected you sooner. Geralt dismounted slowly. You were waiting for me? I was. She stepped forward, drawing back her hood. Her face was pale, elegant, framed by silver hair, so fine it seemed spun from the same mist he had left behind. My name is Lorana. Geralt's hand froze halfway to his sword. That's not possible, he said flatly. You're dead. The woman smiled, faint and sorrowful. I was? But death is seldom as final as we hope. Before he could speak again, the air shifted. The wind rose from nowhere, carrying a scent of cold water and lilies, the scent of the lake. The forest darkened. Mist coiled between the trees, thin at first, then thick as wool. Geralt's medallion began to tremble. Lyrana's voice came soft and distant now, her outline blurring in the fog. You freed the child, Witcher, but you left the door open. And then she was gone, swallowed by the mist that rolled toward him like a living tide. Geralt drew silver, his heart steady and cold. The forest whispered, full of unseen eyes. Somewhere ahead, laughter echoed, light, childish, and terribly familiar. He set his feet, blade ready. "So be it," he muttered. "Once more, then." The fog rushed in to meet him. The fog surged forward, swallowing the path, the trees, the very sound of the world. One heartbeat, it was only mist. The next, it was alive, thick and cold as breath from the grave. Geralt turned, sword gleaming in the half-light, the silver edge catching flashes of pale movement. The forest was gone. There was only gray, boundless, and still, as though he had stepped into another realm entirely. Roach reared, eyes wild. Geralt caught the reins and whispered calm until the mare's shivering eased. He could feel it again, the same magic that had haunted Dunmare, familiar but changed, more deliberate, stronger. The air hummed like a taut string, ready to snap. Then came a whisper soft as silk. "You left me behind." Geralt turned sharply. The voice was Lyrana's, though distant, drawn out through water. "You're not her," he said evenly. "You're what's left of her." A figure took form ahead, Lyrana as she had been before death, pale and slender, eyes glowing faint blue. She drifted above the ground, her movements fluid as smoke. "You freed the child," she said, voice echoing with sorrow. "But the bond we forged did not die. When the curse broke, something else crossed through. It wears my face now." "You mean this isn't you?" Geralt asked, though his sword arm was already poised for the inevitable. The apparition smiled faintly. "No, I am what remains. The echo of the woman you watched die, but the true force, the one you unbound, hunts now. It seeks the hearts that called it forth. It remembers you." A cold wind swept through the mist. Shadows began to move behind Lyrana's form. Vague outlines, flickering shapes like memories half-formed. A child's laughter rang once, soft as a sigh, and was gone. "Where is it?" Geralt demanded. Lyrana raised one trembling hand, pointing east. "It walks between worlds now, feeding on what lingers, regret, grief, longing. The marsh gave it birth, but men's hearts sustain it. Each time a soul yearns for the dead, it grows stronger." Geralt grimaced. "So a curse without end? Convenient? Unless you sever it at the root?" He looked at her, silent. She drifted closer, her expression pleading. "You must find where the veil is thinnest, the place where it first broke. There lies its core. Destroy that, and it will fade forever." The Witcher hesitated, then nodded once. "And you?" The spirit's eyes dimmed. "When it's gone, so am I." The mist trembled, then, rippling outward. The air thickened. The echo of Lyrana's form wavered, her face contorting in sudden fear. "It comes," she whispered. "It knows. We speak." Geralt raised his sword, just as the world split open. From the east, a darkness swept forward, no mere fog, but a living storm of shadow and ash. Within it pulsed a heart of light, sickly white and shifting. Voices spilled out, too many to count. Sobs, laughter, screams, prayers, all merging into a single keening note. "Move!" Geralt barked. Lyrana's form scattered like smoke. The Witcher rolled aside as the first tendril lashed down, striking where he'd stood. The ground erupted, roots twisting, soil hissing like hot iron. The wraith had changed. No longer a single shape, but a swarm, a mass of spirits, drawn together into one terrible form. Faces melted into faces, hands reached from vapor. At its core, faint but unmistakable, was a child's outline. "Merrick," Geralt murmured. The creature's voice was many voices, layered in agony. "Mother said you'd stay with me." Geralt tightened his grip. Your mother's gone. Rest with her. He lunged, the silver blade flashing. The strike cleaved through fog and shadow alike, and for an instant the mist screamed as if alive. Light burst from the wound, white and blinding.
Yet the creature did not die. It recoiled, then reformed, its edges solidifying into something almost human. It came for him. Geralt drew a sign with his free hand, Igni. Flame roared forth, cutting through the gloom, forcing the entity back. The stench of burning marsh and singed air filled his lungs. The spirit shrieked, its form unraveling again, but already it was knitting itself anew. You cannot kill what is already dead, it hissed. Maybe not, Geralt said, circling, but I can make it wish it stayed that way. He struck again, this time driving the blade into the ground at his feet. Erden. The rune flared outward, forming a circle of shimmering violet. The spirit's advance slowed, the edges of its form unraveling where it crossed the light. Geralt advanced inside the sign, step by step. The creature shuddered, twisting, its many faces contorting in anguish. The child's voice broke free again, soft, pleading. Please, I'm cold. Something in Geralt stirred, a memory of Ciri as a girl, small and fierce, shivering after her first hunt. He clenched his jaw. Rest, he said again, voice hard but quiet. You've wandered long enough. He raised the sword in both hands and drove it through the center of the creature's form. The silver met resistance, then gave way with a sound like cracking glass. The world exploded in light. When the glare faded, he stood alone. The mist was gone. Only thin wisps drifted low across the path. The forest returned in silence, the wind sighing softly through pine. He breathed out, lowering his blade. His medallion still quivered faintly, not warning, but echoing. The residue of something vast and tired departing at last. Then a whisper, faint, barely a breath. Thank you. The fog lifted entirely and dawn broke over the treetops. Geralt sheathed his sword, exhaustion pressing against his bones. He found Roach trembling but alive nearby, reins tangled in a low branch. He soothed her, patting her flank. Easy, girl. We've both seen worse. He mounted and turned east toward the rising sun. The forest grew quiet again. Yet behind him, in a patch of lingering mist, a single silver amulet gleamed upon the ground, the same shape Lorana had held in her final moments. He didn't notice it. By nightfall, he reached a small hill overlooking the valley. A hamlet's lights blinked far below, and beyond that, the glint of the river Yaruga winding through the land. He dismounted, built a small fire, and sat staring into the flames. The encounter replayed in his mind, the child's face, the mage's voice, the sorrow that hung like smoke over the marsh. It wasn't the first spirit he'd laid to rest, nor would it be the last, yet something about this one gnawed at him, the sense that he'd cut through more than a curse. He pulled the silver chain from beneath his armor, the wolf medallion catching the firelight, and muttered softly to the empty air. If you're still out there, find peace, both of you. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of lilies from somewhere unseen. The flames flickered, bending eastward as though in answer. Geralt watched until the embers dimmed. Then he lay back upon the cold ground, cloak drawn over his shoulders, eyes fixed on the stars. The path stretched ever onward, endless as the mists he left behind. And though the Witcher never prayed, that night he found himself whispering, not to gods but to memories, hoping they at least might finally rest. The
The morning after was chill and bright, with frost glinting on the grass like a scatter of crushed glass. Geralt of Rivia woke before sunrise, as he always did, and sat for a while in the brittle quiet, watching the mist burn away from the hills. His dreams had been heavy and tangled with memory, faces long gone, voices whispering half-heard words. When he rose, his joints ached from the cold ground and the fight of the night before, but the stiffness passed quickly. A witcher's body healed fast, though the weight inside his chest did not. He packed what little he carried, checked the edge of his blades, and saddled Roach. The mare tossed her head, as if impatient to leave the valley and the stench of magic that still hung faintly in the air. Geralt couldn't blame her. The mists of Dún Mary had been dispersed, but the world felt no cleaner for it. He followed the old trade road east toward Angren, a route little used since the Nilfgaardian Wars. The path wound through low hills, carpeted with fern and heather, where stones jutted from the earth like broken teeth. Streams cut the land in narrow veins of silver, and the wind carried the far cry of hawks. It would have been peaceful had the land not felt so empty. Villages lay half abandoned, cottages sagging under moss. The war had moved on, but its ghosts remained. By noon, he reached a crossroads marked by a wayside shrine. The wooden figure of Melitele stood within, her face worn smooth by rain and the touch of countless hands. Someone had left a sprig of lavender and a small loaf of bread before her. Geralt dismounted, gave a curt nod to the goddess, and cut himself a piece of bread. Old habits, he muttered to Roach. Never know when the gods are listening. He ate, drank from his flask, and was about to ride on when he heard hooves. A rider approached from the north, a woman wrapped in a brown cloak, her horse splattered with mud from hard travel. When she lifted her head, he saw she was young, no more than 20, her dark hair braided tight, eyes keen and wary. "Are you the Witcher?" she asked without preamble. "Sometimes," Geralt said. "They said you passed through Dún Mare, that you faced the mist." He said nothing, only raised an eyebrow. "My brother vanished in those mists," she went on, voice trembling despite her effort to keep it steady. "They found his boots by the lake, nothing more. When the fog cleared, I hoped." She stopped, swallowing hard. "I came to thank you for ending it." Geralt inclined his head slightly. "Don't thank me. I only did what needed doing." "Still," she said softly, "I owe you." She reached into her cloak and drew out a small bundle wrapped in cloth. "Food for the road, and this." Inside lay a tiny carving, roughly shaped from driftwood, a wolf's head with amber eyes. "He used to whittle," she said. "Said wolves protect travelers. Seemed right that you should have it." Geralt studied it for a moment, then closed her fingers around it. "Keep it. You'll need it more than I." The girl smiled faintly, tears threatening but held back. She turned her horse toward the southern road. "Safe path, Witcher." He watched her go until she vanished into the trees, then mounted and continued east. The day passed without incident, yet the woods seemed to whisper around him, carrying echoes of that old magic. More than once he thought he saw shapes between the trees, thin figures of mist that vanished when he looked twice. By evening he came upon an abandoned watchtower at the edge of a clearing. Its stones were cracked, ivy crawling up the walls, a good place for shelter, if not for comfort. He tethered Roach, gathered dry wood, and lit a small fire inside the ruin. The light played against the cold stone, throwing long shadows. He was stripping and cleaning his blades when the sound came, faint like glass chimes stirred by wind. He froze, hand going to his silver sword. The noise came again, clearer now, the delicate ring of metal striking stone. Geralt rose, moving silently toward the tower's entrance. Outside, the night was pale with starlight. The clearing lay empty, grass silvered with dew. But then he saw it, a faint glimmer near the tree line, swaying like a lantern. He approached slowly, sword low. The glow brightened, revealing a small figure standing among the birches. A child, or so it seemed, wearing a tattered cloak, hair the color of moonlight. Geralt's pulse quickened. "Not again," he muttered. But the figure didn't move closer. It only raised one hand and pointed east. Then, in a voice that was not a child's, but a whisper of wind through reeds, it spoke. "The veil is torn." Geralt took a step forward, but the apparition dissolved into mist, scattering like dust. The forest fell silent. His medallion trembled against his chest. He returned to the tower uneasy. The fire burned low, casting dull light on the damp stones. He sat staring into the flames, thinking. The fog should have been gone, the curse ended. Yet something had followed him from Dunmare. Lorana's warning echoed in his mind. You left the door open. Before dawn he packed again. Sleep was impossible. He rode east at first light, following the faint pull of his instincts. The road descended into a narrow valley where fog clung to the river like smoke. As he neared the water, he saw figures ahead. 3 men dragging nets along the shallows. Fishermen, or so he thought, until they straightened and he caught the gleam of steel. Bandits. They blocked the road, grinning like wolves. "Morning, friend," their leader said. His beard was patchy, his eyes mean. "Fine horse, finer swords. You're a long way from safe company." Geralt sighed. "You don't want this fight," the man laughed. "Don't we?" They came at him in a rush. Geralt moved like water, silent, efficient. The first fell before he even drew breath, throat opening under silver. The second swung wildly and met steel halfway through the arc. The third turned to flee. Geralt tripped him with a boot and pressed a blade to his neck. "Who sent you?" "No one. We thought you were a merchant." Geralt sheathed the sword. "You thought wrong." He left them where they fell. He rode until dusk, the sky bleeding gold and crimson. When he finally stopped, he was deep in the forest again. The air was colder here, the trees older. He dismounted, kneeling to drink from a spring, and froze. The water reflected a face beside his own, Lyrana's. Her voice came softly from behind him. "You can't outrun it, Witcher. Not while the mist remembers your name." He rose, turning slowly, silver already in his hand. But the glade was empty, only the whisper of the river and the fading echo of her words. He stood long in silence, eyes narrowing against the gathering dark. Then he mounted Roach once more and rode on deeper into the woods. The path had grown colder, and the mists were not done with him yet. The forest deepened as Geralt pressed onward, its canopy swallowing the morning light until the world dimmed to green shadow. Dew dripped from the boughs in slow rhythmic drops, and the air carried the scent of old bark and damp moss. It was the kind of wood that kept its own secrets, where paths shifted with the seasons and travelers vanished as if the earth had swallowed them. Roach moved cautiously, ears flicking. Even she felt the tension that hung unseen. The medallion at Geralt's neck trembled now and then, a faint vibration like the hum of a trapped bee. Magic lingered here, old and patient. Not dangerous yet, but watchful. He rode without pause until midday, when the forest broke into a hollow of gray stone and cold air. A ruined bridge crossed a stream that murmured through the rocks below. Half its span had fallen, leaving a gap filled by mist. The far bank was overgrown, but he could see the remnants of an old road winding upward toward cliffs beyond. Geralt dismounted, letting Roach drink from the stream. He crouched and touched the water. It was icy cold, far colder than it should have been for late spring. As his fingers brushed the current, he felt something stir, like a faint pulse beneath the surface. He drew back sharply, the medallion buzzing against his chest. "Not natural," he muttered. A voice spoke behind him. "Few things are, Witcher." He turned, sword half drawn, and saw a man standing by the trees, tall, cloaked, with a hunter's bow slung across his back and a wolf skin about his shoulders. His hair was dark and streaked with gray, his eyes a dull amber. "Easy," the stranger said, raising a hand. "Name's Terran. I meant no harm." Geralt's blade did not lower. "You move quiet for a hunter." Terran smiled faintly. "You've walked into my woods. Habit makes me cautious. Yours? I keep them for the Lord of Blackmere Hall, or what's left of it, but lately..." He glanced toward the ruined bridge. "Lately the woods have gone wrong. Game's fled. The water freezes, though the air is warm. And at night I hear voices. Yours isn't the first face I've seen out of the fog either." Geralt sheathed his sword, though his gaze stayed sharp. "Describe the voices." "They whisper names, not mine, others, as if calling for someone lost." Geralt's jaw tightened. "Where's this Blackmere Hall?" "Half a league north. You'll see its tower above the trees. Though if you're wise, you'll give it a wide berth." "I'm not wise," Geralt said, "only thorough." Terran studied him, eyes narrowing. "A witcher's trade, then. You'll find work enough there. Something's nesting in the ruins. I've seen lights at night, blue and cold as grave fire. Show me the way." The hunter hesitated, then nodded. "You'll regret asking." They crossed the half-fallen bridge together, leading their horses through the shallows. The water's chill bit even through leather boots. Mist drifted between the trees, thicker now, curling around the roots, like pale fingers. The deeper they went, the quieter it became, until only the creak of saddles and the whisper of wind remained. An hour's ride brought them to a clearing where black stone walls rose from a tangle of ivy. The hall had once been grand, carved archways, high windows, the remnants of towers. Now it stood hollow and broken, its roof caved in, the courtyard choked with weeds. Geralt dismounted and let his medallion settle against his chest. It quivered instantly. "Something's here," he said. Terran's hand tightened on his bow. "A spirit? Something close, not born of this world." They entered through a gap in the crumbling wall. The air inside the ruins was colder, heavy with the smell of wet stone. Sunlight filtered through cracks in the ceiling, falling in pale shafts upon the floor. The silence was complete, too complete. In the great hall, remnants of a long banquet still lingered. Rusted candlesticks, a collapsed table, shattered cups. But the walls were covered in runes, scrawled hastily and half burned into the stone. Geralt traced one with a gloved hand. It pulsed faintly beneath his touch, alive with dormant magic. "Defensive glyphs," he murmured. "Whoever lived here tried to ward something off." Terran frowned. "Did it work?" Geralt shook his head. "No." A sudden wind swept through the hall, scattering dust and ash. The door behind them slammed shut. Geralt drew steel and turned, senses flaring. The light dimmed as shadows gathered near the far wall. From within them, something stirred. A shape coalesced, a woman in a tattered gown, hair drifting as if underwater. Her eyes glowed a faint, mournful blue. Taryn gasped, stepping back. "By the gods?" Geralt's voice was steady. "Don't move." The spirit glided forward, her expression distant, lost. When she spoke, her voice was hollow. "Have you seen him? My son? He went to the lake and never came home." Geralt's breath caught. The words echoed too closely the cries he had heard in Dunmare. "What's your name?" "Lyrana," the wraith whispered. He froze. The same name, the same voice. But this time her face was younger, untouched by the sorrow that had haunted her before. A shadow of the woman he'd known, or rather of what she'd been before tragedy twisted her soul. "You shouldn't be here," Geralt said. "Your soul was laid to rest." Her gaze drifted toward him. "Rest? There is no rest. The mist remembers. It calls us back." The walls trembled. The runes flared with dull light. Geralt stepped forward, sword ready. "Back away, Taryn." The hunter did not argue. The wraith's eyes blazed brighter. The air turned to frost. "He waits," she whispered. "In the dark between worlds, the gate still stands open." And then the floor cracked open beneath her feet, splitting the stone. From the chasm rose a wind that howled like a living thing, bringing with it the scent of the marsh, stagnant water, decay, lilies. The fog burst into the hall, swirling around them thick as smoke. Geralt slashed a sign into the air. "Irden." The rune circle flared violet, slowing the advancing mist. The wraith recoiled, shrieking. "Go!" Geralt shouted. "Outside!" Taryn bolted through a broken archway. Geralt followed, but before he reached the courtyard, a voice spoke behind him. Cold, familiar. "You can't close what you don't understand." He turned. The wraith of Lyrana stood framed in the doorway, her form flickering between woman and shadow. The child was never the curse, Witcher. He was the key. Then she vanished into the fog, leaving only silence and the faint echo of her words. Geralt lowered his blade slowly, breath clouding the air. Taryn's voice came from behind. "What in all hells was that?" Geralt stared at the broken hall, where frost now crept across the stones like veins of glass. "A warning," he said grimly, "and a beginning." The hunter shivered. "You mean to go after it?" "Yes." "Why?" Geralt's eyes were hard as flint. "Because I opened the door once. I won't leave it open again." He looked toward the east, where the mist thickened beyond the trees. Somewhere out there, something stirred, a power born of grief and bound by his blade's failure. He sheathed his sword and mounted Roach once more. The wind carried whispers through the ruins, voices calling from the veil between life and death. Geralt of Rivia rode toward them without looking back. The mist was waiting. It hung like a living shroud upon the eastern woods, draping the trees in veils of shifting silver. The sun could not pierce it, and birds would not cross it. Geralt of Rivia rode toward that pale wall, as if drawn by a tether, invisible but unyielding. Behind him the ruins of Blackmere Hall dwindled into shadow, its frost-rimed stones already half swallowed by creeping fog. Taryn had begged him to stay, to wait until dawn, but dawn meant nothing when the mist itself devoured light. The Witcher had simply mounted and said, "If I don't return, burn what's left of that hall." Then he had gone. Now the forest deepened, and all sense of distance vanished. The world became soundless, the air thick as water. Roach's breath steamed in quick bursts. Geralt's medallion thrummed against his chest, an endless vibration like the heartbeat of something buried deep beneath the earth. He knew this feeling, the threshold between worlds, the place where the veil had torn once before, only now it was wider, stronger. He could smell the damp tang of marsh water, hear the faint echo of waves upon a shore that should not exist. When the first voices came, they were quiet, almost tender. "Geralt," they whispered, "you freed us." He did not answer. The fog shifted and shadows coalesced into shapes, figures walking beside him translucent, faces drawn and pale, the dead of Dunmeri. He recognized some of them, the weeping mother, the miller's boy, the men lost on patrol. They watched him with hollow eyes as they drifted past, fading again into the mist. Then another figure appeared, clearer than the rest. A woman in a gray cloak, her hair stirring in wind that was not there. Lyrana, or what remained of her. "You shouldn't have come," she said softly. "I don't take orders from the dead." She smiled, a faint, sorrowful curve of her lips. "Then you take none at all. Still the Witcher, bound only by your path." He dismounted, letting Roach stand trembling at the edge of the fog. "Tell me where it is." "The gate?" She shook her head slowly. "You think to close it with sword and sign? Foolish man. It is not a door to shut, but a wound to heal, and every wound bleeds from both sides." "Show me." Her gaze shifted toward the east, where the mist thickened into a distant glow. "Beyond the river, where the water runs backward and time forgets itself. But the one you seek already waits. It knows you're coming." "Then I won't keep it waiting." Lyrana reached out as if to touch his face, her hand passing through the air like smoke. "Be careful, Geralt. The mist remembers more than names now." Then she was gone. He rode on until the forest fell away and the ground turned to wet sand. Before him lay a river broader than any he had seen in these parts. Its surface shone like mercury, moving sluggishly against the current. Across the water, the fog pulsed with faint light, rising and falling like breath. Geralt tethered Roach and waded into the shallows. The water was freezing, burning against his boots. When he reached the center, the current reversed beneath him, pulling eastward, dragging him toward the light. He let it carry him. He emerged upon a bank unlike any in the living world. The trees there were pale as bone, their branches bare though the season was warm. The air shimmered faintly, and distant shapes moved within the mist, too tall, too thin. The veil between realms was thinning here. He moved forward quietly, senses alert. The sound of running water faded, replaced by a low hum that grew from the ground itself, a hollow, resonant pulse that made the stones tremble beneath his boots. At the heart of the clearing stood a monolith of black stone, half buried in the earth and covered with runes that glowed faint blue. The same sigils he had seen on the walls of Blackmere Hall. Around it lay the remains of what might once have been an altar. Fragments of bone, melted candles, torn scraps of cloth. Geralt knelt, brushing aside the dirt. The markings were ancient, pre-conjunction, older even than the elder's speech. He could not read them, but he felt their meaning. Binding, passage, exchange. The ground stirred. A shadow rose from the base of the stone, thick and coiling, gathering into a shape that was neither man nor beast. It spoke with many voices, layered upon each other, until the air itself vibrated. "You open the way," Geralt drew silver, "and I'm here to close it." Laughter answered him, low and cold. "Close? You cannot close what your kind are built from.
You are born of the same crossing, the same mistake. The shadow shifted, condensing until it stood before him in familiar form. A child, Merrick, but taller now, his eyes burning with white flame. You freed me from the lake, it said. You freed us all. Geralt's grip tightened on the hilt. You're no child. You're what crawled out when the worlds collided, a memory that learned to feed. And you're a weapon that learned to feel, it hissed. We are not so different. It raised a hand and the ground split. From the cracks poured mist, thick and writhing, taking shape around them. Faces formed. Lorana's, the villagers, others he did not know. They reached for him, whispering his name. Geralt drew a sign in the air. Quen. The golden shield flared just as the wraiths struck, their touch freezing against the barrier. He countered with Igni, a burst of flame tearing through the fog. Screams filled the air, human and not. The boy's voice rose above them all. You can't fight memory, Witcher. You carry it with you. You are the mist. The ground trembled harder. The monolith's runes blazed white. Geralt knew what was happening. It was awakening, drawing power from both sides of the veil. If it reached full strength, the worlds would merge here as they had once before. He lunged, slashing through the fog toward the stone. The boy screamed and the mist coiled, striking at him from every direction. Ghostly hands clawed at his armor, tearing at his limbs, but he pushed through each step heavier than the last. His medallion burned against his throat. With a roar, he drove his silver sword into the base of the monolith. Sparks flew, and the ground erupted in blinding light. The world turned upside down. He saw flashes. Kaer Morhen's walls, Ciri's face, Yen's dark eyes, then the marsh, the lake, the faces of all he'd freed. They swirled around him, drawn into the stone, their cries fading into silence. When the light died, he was on his knees. The monolith was cracked, its glow extinguished. The mist was gone. He rose slowly, breathing hard, sword slick with dark fluid that evaporated into the air. The river beside him flowed once more in its rightful course. The trees were still. He waited for a voice, a whisper, anything, but none came, only the soft murmur of water. Then, faint and far away, he thought he heard laughter, not cruel but light, like a child at play. He turned toward the sound, but there was nothing. He sheathed his sword and looked up. The sky was pale and clear. No mist, no veil, only the quiet of a world that had closed its wound. Rest now, he said aloud, though no one could hear him. Then he crossed the river again, back into the realm of men. Behind him, the broken monolith crumbled, its pieces sinking into the earth as if the forest itself wished to bury what had been done. But deep beneath the roots, something glowed faintly, one last ember of light pulsing like a heartbeat, patient and waiting. Geralt rode on without looking back. The road west wound through country untouched by war, though it bore the look of places the world had forgotten. Moss swallowed the stones of old walls, and thickets crept over the outlines of vanished fields. The air was still damp from the night before, but the sun fought its way through thin clouds, scattering the last veils of mist. It was, for the first time in many days, a clear morning. Geralt rode at an unhurried pace, the rhythm of Roach's hooves steady as breath. He felt the ache of fatigue deep in his bones, the kind of weariness that no potion or sign could drive off. Yet beneath that weight, there was something else, a stillness he could not name. The wound in the world had closed, for now.
He had seen gates between realms before, seen creatures crawl through them, hungering for the warmth of a world that was not theirs. But this had been different. It was not a monster he'd fought, but grief itself, a shadow cast by love twisted into something endless. He knew such battles never stayed won. A crow flew overhead, its shadow darting across the road. Geralt lifted his head. Ahead, a village clung to a ridge above the river, half a dozen cottages, a chapel, and smoke rising from hearths. The sign at the entrance was crooked but legible, Velen's Cross. He reined in Roach by the well in the square. Children paused in their play to stare at him, whispering behind their hands. A woman drawing water crossed herself and hurried away. Only an old man sitting on the steps of the chapel seemed unbothered. He watched Geralt with pale, thoughtful eyes and said, "You've come from the east." Geralt nodded. "Then you've seen the fog." "I've seen it," the Witcher replied. The old man spat into the dust. "We heard tales, said it swallowed men whole, and that it spoke with voices of the lost. You ended it?" "I did what I could." The old man's gaze drifted toward the river. "Aye, well, things'll grow again. Maybe folk will stop fearing the water." He hesitated, then added, "There's ale at the inn if you're wanting it. Or if you're wanting quiet, there's the chapel." Geralt considered, then chose the latter. Inside the chapel was small but clean. Candles burned before the altar, their light steady despite the open door. He removed his gloves, tracing the edge of a carved relief, Melitele again, as she was often depicted in these borderlands. Not the mother of mercy, but the guardian of the threshold, one hand lifted as if to bar the way to something unseen. The priest, a stooped woman with white hair, entered from a side door carrying a bowl of herbs. She looked up, startled. "Forgive me, stranger, I didn't hear—" "Oh." Her eyes widened slightly as she took in his swords. "A witcher? I thought your kind passed this way only in dark times." Geralt gave a faint smile. "These are dark enough." She set the bowl upon the altar. "Perhaps, yet dawn follows night. Always." She studied him for a long moment. "You've seen things men shouldn't see. It clings to you like smoke. Comes with the trade." "Perhaps. Still, if the soul is burdened, it finds no rest." He said nothing. There were no words that could make sense of the weight he carried, the faces in the fog, the voices that would not quiet even now. The priest sighed and began lighting fresh candles. "Stay as long as you wish. The gods don't often grant peace, but sometimes they lend silence." He stayed until evening. The light through the chapel windows turned to gold, then to blood red. When he stepped outside, the village lay hushed, smoke curling from chimneys, dogs barking in the distance. The sky was clear, and the first stars shone faintly above the river. He found a place beneath a lone oak at the edge of the village, built a small fire, and shared his supper with Roach. The night was cool, and for once it did not smell of damp or decay. He lay back against the tree and watched the constellations wheel slowly overhead, the dragon, the great bear, the wolf. He remembered the lessons of Kaer Morhen, Vesemir's gravel voice naming each star, each omen. "The sky keeps its own ledger," Vesemir had said, "and we are all written somewhere in its pages." Geralt closed his eyes. He awoke to the sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate. He reached for his sword before his eyes were fully open. A figure stood at the edge of the firelight. Not mist, not spirit. Human. A man cloaked and hooded, face shadowed. "Peace, Witcher," the stranger said. "I mean no harm." Few who come at night mean peace, Geralt replied, not lowering the blade. The man stepped closer, and firelight caught his features, lean, sharp, eyes gray as storm clouds. My name is Alaric. I've been following you. Unwise habit. Perhaps, but necessary. I am a scholar of the arcane. What the Brotherhood once called a keeper of rifts. I read signs of disturbance in these lands, and your path crosses them all. Geralt sheathed his sword slowly. You're late? The gates closed? Alaric's mouth tightened. Closed, yes, but not sealed. I felt the shock when you struck it. A crack remains. Small now, but growing. The Witcher said nothing. Alaric crouched near the fire, warming his hands. You think it ended with the boy, with the mage, with your blade. But that was only one scar among many. The conjunction left 1,000 such wounds. Some sleep for centuries, others wake at the whim of grief or blood or chance. Geralt's gaze hardened. If you're telling me, the mists will return. They will in time, the scholar said quietly. And not only here, you're part of this, Witcher. Your kind was born of that same collision. Do you truly think you can hunt what you are? The question hung in the air. The fire popped, sending sparks into the dark. Geralt stared into the flames until they blurred, seeing in them faces he would not name. At last he said, If it comes again, I'll be there. Alaric nodded, as though he had expected no other answer. Then may the path guide you. I'll go west, to gather what lore I can before the circle silences it. If you seek me, ask for the hermit of Kedwin. He rose and vanished into the night, leaving only the echo of his steps on the road. Geralt watched the darkness a while longer, then stirred the fire with his boot. Always another scholar, he muttered. Always another warning. The stars wheeled on, cold and clear. The Witcher lay down once more, the scent of wood smoke thick in his cloak. Somewhere beyond the hills, the river murmured like distant breath. He listened until sleep took him. A light, watchful sleep filled with the faint echo of laughter, carried on a wind that was not quite of this world. And though the night remained clear, a thin band of mist crept along the horizon before dawn. The dawn came veiled and silent. A thin haze lay across the low hills, gilded faintly by the rising sun. Geralt of Rivia rose from his makeshift camp, stretched the stiffness from his shoulders, and regarded the distant horizon. The faint band of mist he had seen in the night had thickened, curling along the river valley like pale smoke. He saddled Roach without a word. The mare snorted and stamped, uneasy. Witchers trusted their horses. They knew when the world shifted underfoot. Geralt brushed her mane, whispering, Easy, girl. One last road. They set off at a steady pace toward the west, following the river as it bent toward the foothills. The sky brightened, though the light seemed thin, washed of color. The farther they went, the denser the mist grew, crawling over the water in slow, deliberate waves. It was not the suffocating fog of Dunmare, not yet, but it breathed the same chill. By mid-morning, the path narrowed through a gorge where jagged cliffs rose on either side. The air here was cold and damp, and the echo of hoofbeats lingered too long, as if the stone repeated them from another world. Geralt drew his cloak close, eyes scanning the ledges above. He caught movement, small, quick, a shadow darting from one crag to another, then another. Not ghosts, not yet. Come out, he said quietly. A soft laugh answered him. You've a hunter's ears, Witcher. From the rocks ahead emerged 3 figures, men in tattered leathers, faces pale and eyes sunken. Their swords were old, But cared for? Not brigands? Not quite? Deserters, perhaps? Geralt stopped Roach, hand resting on the hilt of his steel blade. I've no quarrel with you. Nor we with you, said the one in front, a scarred man with a wolfish grin. Unless your purse is heavier than it looks. It isn't. The man's grin widened. Then your horse will do. Geralt sighed. Don't. They drew their blades. It was over in the span of a breath, a flicker of silver and steel, the dull ring of steel against armor, the wet hiss of air cut clean. When silence returned, the men lay motionless among the stones. Geralt wiped his sword on the nearest cloak and sheathed it. Told you not to. The mist thickened as he left the gorge, curling between the trees that now lined the path. It carried a smell of river mud and lilies, the same scent that had haunted him since Dunmer. He halted Roach and listened. Nothing. Only the low murmur of water somewhere ahead. Yet his medallion trembled, faintly pulsing against his skin, magic but weak. Like an echo, he followed it until the forest opened upon a small lake shore. The water was still, mirror smooth, reflecting the pale disk of the sun. At its edge stood an old shrine of black stone, cracked and worn. The carvings were half erased by time, but he recognized them. Melitele again, her outstretched hand raised, not in blessing but in warning. Geralt dismounted, crouched, and touched the ground. It was cold as grave soil. The medallion vibrated harder. Beneath the surface, faint traces of runes glimmered, buried wards, long dormant. He stood. Another wound, he muttered. The air shifted behind him. You found it, said a voice. He turned. A figure stood among the reeds. A woman cloaked in gray. Not spirit, not illusion, real. Her face was drawn, sharp, her eyes pale as frost. I thought you dead, he said. Perhaps I was, Laurana replied. But you tore the veil. Death is no longer what it was. Geralt's hand hovered near his sword. What are you now? Something unfinished, she said simply. When you broke the monolith, the wound sealed, but not cleanly. Part of what crossed remained here, in me. And now the mist follows where I walk. Her voice was steady, but sorrow lay beneath it. The Witcher studied her, senses alert. She cast no shadow upon the water. I didn't summon you, he said. No, but you can end this. He frowned. You said the door was closed. It is. Yet the crack widens again. Grief feeds it, fear. The same emotions that called me back to life. The surface of the lake rippled, though no wind stirred. Shapes formed beneath the water. Faces half seen, eyes wide. Mouths open in silent cry. The dead. The mist's memory. What happens if it opens again? Geralt asked. The veil will not merely tear, it will merge, both worlds, living and dead, bound in one. Then we stop it. She met his gaze. You can't. Not alone. He took a step closer. What must be done? She hesitated. The power that binds the mist is anchored here in this lake. It feeds on memory, on sorrow. To destroy it, someone must take its place. Become the anchor willingly. Geralt's eyes narrowed. You mean die? Not die. Be bound. She smiled faintly. You've carried enough ghosts, Witcher. Let me bear this one. He shook his head. You've already given too much. And yet I still stand, she whispered, because part of me remembers what it is to love, and love always endures, even as it destroys. The lake began to glow faintly, a soft silver light rising from its depths. The mist thickened, curling around them both like a living thing. Lyrana stepped toward the water. Geralt caught her arm. If you do this, there's no coming back. I know. He released her slowly. She walked to the edge, her reflection merging with the light. "Keep them safe," she said softly. "The world will forget, but it must not happen again." The Witcher stood motionless as she waded into the lake. The glow brightened until it blinded him. The water rose, swallowing her form, and the mist screamed, a sound that was not human, not of any world he knew. Then it was gone. The light faded, and the lake stilled once more. No ripple broke its surface. The scent of lilies lingered, sweet and cold. Geralt waited long after silence fell. When at last he turned away, the air was clear and the medallion lay still against his chest. He mounted Roach, the weight of finality pressing upon him like armor. As he rode back through the forest, he looked once over his shoulder. The shrine was half sunken in the water now, its carvings gone, its warning hand raised toward the sky. By the time he reached the valley, the mist had vanished entirely. The land was quiet, washed clean. Yet as the sun dipped low, he thought he saw far above the lake a faint shimmer of silver, drifting like a wisp of cloud, and he wondered, not for the first time, if peace was ever truly won or merely postponed until the next shadow rose to take its place. The road stretched before him long and endless, and Geralt of Rivia rode on. The road from the lake wound through valleys that shimmered with new frost, though it was not yet winter. Geralt of Rivia rode in silence, his cloak drawn tight against the wind. Behind him the sky still bore a faint silver glow, the last trace of the mist's power sinking beneath the earth. He did not look back. Witchers learned early that looking back seldom changed what lay behind. The path led west where the land opened into moors and low rolling hills. Flocks of crows followed his passing, black specks circling in the pale light. To any other traveler it might have seemed an omen. To Geralt it was company. He rode until dusk, before stopping beside a solitary oak that marked a crossroads. From its gnarled branches hung the remains of old offerings, ribbons bleached white by years of wind, a child's carved toy, a faded braid of wheat. The tree whispered softly in the breeze, as though it still remembered the prayers spoken beneath it. Geralt dismounted, fed Roach an apple from his pouch, and gathered wood for a small fire. The ground was hard, frost-bitten. The smell of cold earth filled his lungs. When the flames caught, he sat beside them, hands clasped, staring into the dance of embers. He could feel the fatigue creeping through him, not of body, but of spirit. The events of the past weeks had left him hollow, as though something essential had been cut away. Lorana's sacrifice had sealed the veil, but her words lingered. Love endures, even as it destroys. He wondered if she had spoken of herself or of him. A sound stirred beyond the firelight. Geralt's hand went to his sword, but what emerged from the dark was no foe, only a traveler wrapped in a cloak of coarse wool, a pack slung over one shoulder. His beard was silvered, his eyes the mild brown of a man accustomed to watching more than speaking. "Evening, Witcher," the man said, inclining his head. "Might I share your fire?" Geralt gestured to the far side of the flames. "If you've no quarrel." "None at all." The stranger settled down, sighing as he stretched his legs. "Cold night for the season." "Too cold." They sat in silence a while. The fire cracked. Somewhere an owl called from the trees. At last the man spoke again. "Name's Ewald. I travel the roads as a collector of tales, though these days tales seem scarcer than honest coin." He smiled faintly. "Folk told me there was a witcher in these parts. Said you cut down the fog that ate Dunmare. Geralt stirred the fire with a stick. Folk say many things. True enough. Still, there's talk of strange lights in the marshes, of whispers that call to the living. I thought the mist gone. It is. What's left is only memory, harmless. Ewald studied him over the flames. You don't sound certain? Geralt gave a dry smile. Certainties for priests. The traveler chuckled softly. Aye, that it is. He reached into his pack and drew out a flask. Wine from Toussaint. Found it in a ruined cellar east of here. I'd share if you'd care for a drink. Geralt took the flask, tasted the wine, and passed it back. Better than anything brewed in Lyria? Everything is, Ewald agreed. He leaned back, eyes half closed. You know, I once met a witcher before, long ago near Sintra. He told me your kind live by a rule, never involve yourselves beyond the contract. Yet you've wandered a long way from coin, haven't you? Geralt's expression hardened. What's your point? No point. Only curiosity. Ewald took another sip, then added quietly, You look like a man who's seen more ghosts than he's slain. Geralt said nothing. The fire popped, throwing sparks into the cold air. After a moment, the traveler rose. I'll not trouble you further. Roads are safer near a witcher's fire, but Dawn's my companion now. Geralt nodded once. Safe travels. Ewald slung his pack over his shoulder. And you, White Wolf? The name froze Geralt where he sat. He had not spoken it. He looked up sharply, but the traveler was already gone, fading into the mist that had gathered again around the edges of the clearing. The Witcher stood, scanning the shadows. The air had grown colder, thick with the scent of water and lilies. His medallion trembled faintly. No, he whispered, not again. The mist rolled closer, pale and silent. A shape moved within it, tall, thin, cloaked. For an instant he thought it was Ewald returned. But the gait was wrong, too fluid, too graceful. A woman stepped into the light. Her hair was silver, her face pale as moonlight. Not Lorana, someone older. Her eyes were white like frosted glass, yet they saw him clearly. You carry her mark, she said, voice like the rustle of dead leaves. Geralt drew no blade. Who are you? The keeper of the veil, she replied. What your kind once called Pravochna in the Elder tongue. I guard the threshold between realms, or I did until it was broken. Geralt frowned. Then you know it's sealed again. She nodded slowly. Sealed, yes, but not healed. The world shifts when men tamper with what was meant to stay apart. The conjunction never ended, Witcher. It only sleeps. And you, she tilted her head, you are one of its children. I didn't choose that. No one chooses what they are born from. But choice lies in what you defend. The mist thickened behind her, forming shapes that swayed like figures, half awake. The wound you closed still bleeds in the places between. There will be others who seek it. Sorcerers, kings, even your own kind. They will not all mean harm, but harm will come nonetheless. Geralt's gaze darkened. Then tell me what to do. Walk your path, she said simply. Guard the balance as you always have. But know this, the mist will call again, and when it does, it will call you by name. Her form began to fade. Remember, child of the path, the door never stays shut forever. Then she was gone. Geralt stood alone once more. The fire guttered low, throwing long shadows across the ground. He exhaled slowly, rubbing a hand across his scarred face. Always another door, he murmured. Dawn came pale and cold. He mounted Roach and turned north toward the blue line of mountains that marked the edge of Caedwyn. The world felt empty and vast, Yet the air carried a strange stillness, as if watching him. By midday, the mist had vanished entirely. The sky was bright, washed clean. Geralt rode without looking back, his eyes on the horizon where the sun burned like a blade's edge. Behind him, far in the valley he had left, the oak at the crossroads shivered in the wind. One of the ribbons tied to its branch came loose and drifted upward, carried on an unseen current. It rose higher and higher until it vanished into the light, leaving only the faintest glimmer of silver in the morning air. The mountains of Cadwyn rose before him, like the backs of sleeping beasts, gray, ancient, and vast against the pale winter sky. The air grew colder with every mile, the wind sharper. Geralt of Rivia rode wordlessly through the high passes, cloak drawn close, his thoughts heavy as the clouds pressing low over the peaks. Snow had begun to fall, fine as ash, melting as it touched the ground. The scent of pine and stone filled the air. Roach's breath misted in quick bursts, her hooves crunching through the frost. Geralt had been riding for days, following no contract, no summons, only the quiet pull of instinct that led him north, toward Kaer Morhen perhaps, though he had not yet admitted it even to himself. The path wound through a ravine where the walls of rock loomed close and the light dimmed. He rode with one hand on the reins, the other resting lightly on his sword. Old habits. The silence here was absolute. Even the wind had lost its voice. Only the steady rhythm of hooves broke the stillness. At the ravine's end, the road widened into a plateau overlooking a frozen lake. The surface gleamed like glass, and beneath the ice, shapes moved, slow, pale distortions, as though something ancient still stirred in the deep. Geralt dismounted, leading Roach carefully across the shore. His medallion gave a single faint tremor, then stilled. Not danger, but remembrance. The silence of the place carried weight, as if the world itself held its breath. He stood a while at the lake's edge, watching snowflakes vanish on the ice. So many times he had walked away from ruins, villages drowned in fog, towns torn by monsters or men, and each time the silence that followed felt heavier. There was always another wound to mend, another curse to break, but the world healed slower than he could cut. A sound drew his attention. The distant echo of hooves on stone. He turned, hand brushing the hilt of his sword. A rider approached from the south, a figure cloaked in blue, moving with the easy grace of one accustomed to travel. When she drew near, he saw the glint of silver hair beneath her hood, not white as his, but pale gold. Catching the faint light, her eyes were sharp, the color of storm clouds over water. "Witcher," she said, reining in her horse. Her voice was calm, measured. "You've been difficult to find." "I wasn't hiding," Geralt replied. "No," she said softly, "but the world hides things from itself sometimes. I am called Erin of Ban Ard. I serve the Conclave now, such as it is. We've heard whispers that you've dealt with something beyond your usual craft." Geralt gave a humorless smile. "Whispers travel fast for something buried in mist. The fog that swallowed Dunmer was felt as far as Redania. The balance between realms shuddered when it broke. We need to know what you did." He turned back to the lake. "I closed a wound, a gate between this world and another." Erin dismounted, boots crunching on the frost. "Then you understand why I'm here. That wound, whatever name you give it, still bleeds. The barrier weakens. Others may try to use it. We must find its echo before it grows." "I already found it," he said, "and buried it. gaze lingered on him, assessing. You sound certain? Certainty's rare in my trade, but I saw it end. And yet you ride north, away from where it ended. He met her eyes. Because I don't trust endings. For a time, neither spoke. The wind rose, stirring snow into small spirals that danced along the ground. Erin drew her cloak tighter. The conclave fears more tears will open. The mists you dispersed may have scattered, but their magic does not vanish. It seeps. The world grows thin in places, Witcher. Cadwyn, Redania, even Skellige. Geralt's hand drifted to his medallion. It was still. Then they'll need someone to close them again. That's not what I came to ask. Then what? To understand. Her voice softened. The tales say you faced grief, made flesh, that you freed it. But grief is not so easily slain. What did you truly fight? He thought of the boy's pale face, of Lorana's eyes shining in the mist, of voices whispering from the fog. You carry us. He had no answer that would fit into words. Something that shouldn't exist, he said at last. Erin nodded slowly, as if she had expected no other answer. Perhaps none of us should. The sun sank lower, the sky turning to steel. You'll return to your conclave? He asked. Yes. There are others watching the skies. Storms come that are not of weather. She hesitated. If the mist calls again, Witcher, find me. I can help. Geralt almost smiled. I thought mages preferred to study from afar. Sometimes, she said, but even scholars tire of watching others drown. She mounted again, pulling her hood up. Take care, White Wolf. The world changes faster than men can follow, even witchers. He watched her ride away until the blue of her cloak vanished among the rocks. The lake lay quiet again. He stood for a long while until the snow began to thicken, coating the world in white. Then he mounted Roach and turned north once more. The wind carried faint sounds through the mountains, howls that might have been wolves or echoes of something older. He rode on, steady and silent, until the first dark outlines of Kaer Morhen's walls rose against the fading sky. Smoke curled from its chimneys. The sight stirred a rare warmth in him, though faint. Home, of a sort. A place for ghosts to rest a while. As he approached the gates, the heavy oak doors groaned open. Lambert stood waiting, arms crossed, his usual scowl softening at the sight of him. About time, Lambert said. We thought you'd found a tavern to die in. Nearly did, Geralt replied, twice. Any coin, at least? Not a crown. Lambert snorted. Figures. Inside the fortress was much as he remembered. Cold stone, the scent of oil and steel, the hollow quiet of a place too big for the few who lived there. Eskel looked up from the forge, nodding in greeting. Vesemir's old chair by the fire stood empty, but the flames burned bright. Geralt unbuckled his sword belts and hung them by the hearth. The weight slid from his shoulders, though it lingered somewhere deeper still. Lambert poured ale into a battered mug and pushed it toward him. To surviving, he said. Geralt took it, the corners of his mouth twitching. To surviving, he echoed. They drank. The fire crackled, and for a little while the world was still. Later, when the others had gone to their quarters and the fortress slept, Geralt stood alone at the window, watching the snow fall over the courtyard. The sky was clear now, the stars sharp and cold. Somewhere far to the south he thought he saw a glimmer of silver mist upon the horizon, no larger than a breath, yet enough to make his medallion tremble once. He watched it until it faded, then turned from the window, the faintest smile ghosting his lips. The path was never done, but for tonight there was peace, and in that peace, the white wolf rested.